Have you ever been in a situation where you desperately wanted to say no, but you just couldn't bring yourself to say it? Like there's a solid part of you that's actually afraid to say no. I mean, partial because of your own physical safety, but also in the sense of you don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want to offend them. You are so scared of what they're going to say that you let go of your own wants and needs. If that's you, I want you to know that you are so not alone. But I also want to preface this video with, regardless of what it is, particularly in cases where you need to ask for consent and you're afraid to say no, no one, and absolutely no one, has any right to guilt you into saying no or changing your mind. If it's not an enthusiastic hell yes, it is a hell no, period, end of story. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to say no, how to get comfortable with saying no, how to be okay with disappointing others to make sure that your own safety is number one. Now, when I say safety, I'm not just talking about physical safety. It could be physical safety, yes, but I'm also talking emotional safety, mental safety, spiritual safety. There's a lot more facets to you than just physical. And just because someone isn't physically doing something to you right now in this moment doesn't mean that your safety isn't at risk. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But really quick, before I get started, if this is your first time hanging out, welcome. My name is Karleigh Saunders. I'm a confidence and abuse recovery coach. I am here to help you not only heal from the abuse that you endured, but to build the skill of confidence you can step into the life of independence and freedom that you deserve. So today we're talking about how to say no. As of this recording, about a year ago now, where I was in a situation where I was absolutely terrified. I was in an intimate situation with someone that I trusted. But in this specific instance, even though this was someone that I fully trusted, my boundaries were pushed. And not only were my boundaries pushed, but I genuinely felt scared for my safety. I was in a very compromised position to where if things would have gone differently, I don't know what would have happened after that. I don't know that I would have been okay. In this compromising position, I looked up and I was absolutely terrified. The person that I trusted so fully, my safe place, the person that I confided so much of myself in, the one person that I could be myself with, was so fully angry at me for stating my boundaries. And this particular instance actually triggered me to having flashbacks of the moment when I was 17, where I didn't have a choice and consent wasn't given as an option. The more I protested, the more I said, no, I didn't want to do this, the louder and more aggressive he became. I never in a million years would have thought he would have ever acted like this. To this day, I am still completely mind blown at the complete character shift. But I knew in that moment that it was now or never. It was either I say, hey, my boundaries don't matter, and I continue with what's about to happen, knowing that I wouldn't be comfortable, or I knew that this was my moment to stand up for myself and say that I wasn't going to allow this anymore. I got up, I was grabbing my things, rushing around, trying to just get my stuff so I could leave. And he was rolling his eyes, telling me that I was overreacting and none of this was necessary. But in that moment, I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay anymore. My safe place had been destroyed. There was an atomic bomb dropped right in the middle of my safe house. And I knew that at that point, it wasn't safe anymore and I had to get out. I knew that if I let my boundary go this time, I knew that if I stayed, I knew that if I allowed anything to happen after that point, anything I said after that would have no merit. He wouldn't trust the thing that I said and neither would I. And the whole time that this was happening, my brain was pelting me with reasons why I should just suck it up and stay, why I was overreacting, why my boundaries didn't matter. I was pelted with every single fear you could think of. I was so terrified of losing this person. I cared about this person so much. This person mattered to me, and I couldn't in that moment fully comprehend that all of my trust had been completely broken, and my safe place had never been safe to begin with. From the time of me grabbing my things to getting in my car and getting home felt like hours. It felt like it was never going to end. And I cried myself to sleep that night because I was just so broken. And the reason that I share this with you is because I don't ever want you to think that I think this stuff is easy. I know from firsthand experience that stating your boundaries comes with a lot of risk. Stating your boundaries in some cases can put your physical safety at risk. Stating your boundaries in some cases can put your emotional safety at risk. Stating your boundaries in some cases means that you're going to lose somebody that you care about. And even so, even when that happens, more terrifying than anything else is stating your boundary and finding out that the person that you put all of this trust in never fully cared about you to begin with. But you know what? Even though I left, even though the whole way home I wanted to text him and say that I'm sorry for overreacting, even though the entire drive home I hated myself and I was so scared of the loneliness that I would feel the next day without this person in my life, there was a still small voice in the back of my head that was cheering. It was cheering and it was so proud of me because for the first time in my life, I stated a boundary and I kept it. For the first time in my life, I respected myself enough to not allow myself to be in a situation where I wasn't respected. So even though all of that ish was going down, my respect for myself grew in the moment. And that moment is a pinnacle point that has shifted my life ever since. After sharing my story with a friend of mine and talking with a few clients about it, I realized that this isn't something that happens easily. Even though I struggled with it, I wasn't the only one that struggled with it. So what did I do? What did I do for me to actually be okay with doing that? What is it that made my brain click and go, no, this is not okay? And after a few weeks of moping, I really sat down and I figured out and I traced my steps to look back at the growth that had to happen in order for me to get to this point. And I'm going to share that with you today. I'm going to share with you the step by step in order to build up that skill and learn to say no. All right, so step one is the why test. When it comes to saying no, there are probably some people you have no issue saying no to. Like, dude, peace out. You're not even worth my time. But then there are other people that you can't even imagine saying no to. And chances are you don't fully understand why you do this, why it's so hard to say no to some people and not to others. And even if you do think that you know, it's probably a really surface level reason. Like, oh, I just don't like them. Or, oh, I love them. Right? Really surface level stuff that just kind of is your instinct first answer. What this means is that it's enough for you to justify it. It's a reason for you to beat yourself up, but not a deep enough reason for you to actually change the behavior. Enter in the why test. This is a test that I have found to work incredibly well. I've talked about it in several other videos, but I really want you to focus in on it here. If I'm being completely honest, my clients hate this because this is something I do with them constantly, all the time, because it really is that powerful. However, it can get really repetitive and super annoying. But I promise you that if you stick with it and you do the work, this is so worth it and it could actually change your life. So what's the why test anyway? The why test is basically what it sounds like. It's sitting there asking yourself why over and over and over, literally being an annoying toddler to yourself, asking why again and again and again and again and again and again until you reach a point where you have no more whys left to ask because the truth is right there. It's digging in and finding the why behind certain behaviors, certain things that you're wanting to do or wanting to stop doing. So then that way you can actually get to the root of the behavior. So what I want you to do as you're doing the why test is pull out a journal or maybe even just turn on your phone and record yourself as you're having, this conversation with yourself. And I don't want you to skip the documentation part. It really, really is important. You need to have this documented so that way you can go back and keep digging into it. So again, if you don't want to write it down, that's fine. But you need to record yourself asking yourself these questions. You need to have this trail to go back to continue to get to the root. So now you've got your recording set up, whether you are journaling or whether you're recording yourself. I want you to think of a time where you struggled to say no. Whether this was an intimate situation, whether this was someone asking you to do something that you didn't want to do, but you said yes anyway. Maybe you were so overbooked and you've got the kids going to 10 different sports and you've got so much on your plate and yet you still said yes to one more thing, even though you really didn't want to. Whatever it is, write it down, say it out loud. And then I want you to ask yourself, why? In that moment, why couldn't you say no? And then I want you to write down the answer or say the answer out loud. If you said no in the case of an intimate moment, maybe you couldn't say no because you were afraid that they wouldn't stay with you. So that's where you start. Then ask why. Why would it bother you that he wouldn't stay with you? Maybe you're afraid to be alone. Why are you afraid to be alone? Maybe it's because you feel unwanted. And if he leaves you, That means you're right. Why does being alone make you feel unwanted? Maybe you go back. Maybe you've got some mommy issues. Maybe you've got some daddy issues. I got both of those coming out the yin yang, so you're not alone. This is not, and I also want to preface this as well. This is not room for self-judgment. I don't want you to beat yourself up, and I don't want you to limit your answers based on what you think you should say. This is for you and you alone. None of this is for judgment, so I'm not giving you permission to beat up on yourself. What I am wanting you to do is become aware of what's happening and why it's happening. As you ask yourself these questions, you may find that some stuff kind of bubbles up to the surface. That's normal. Let it. If something comes up and it makes you anxious, or it makes you angry, or it makes you sad, feel whatever it is you feel. Take a break. Feel free to stop the recording, put down the pencil, feel whatever it is you feel. Again, there are no good or bad feelings. There are no right or wrong feelings. There are no good or bad thoughts, right or wrong thoughts, right? They're all neutral. All of our thoughts, feelings, whatever, are neutral, and there's no reason to beat ourselves up for thinking or feeling a certain way. So if you've got to feel something, let yourself feel it. Don't stuff it. Let yourself feel, because chances are if something comes up, you're not going to be able to get to the next level of that why until you allow yourself to feel through that layer right here. But here's the thing, feel free to take a break from the why test. If this stuff runs deep, you may need to do this a few times. Feel free to do the why test for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, put down the pencil and come back to it the next day. But here's the thing, don't forget about it. Set a reminder in your phone. Come back to it. Keep doing this. I know that this is going to get hard, and I know that this can get intense, but I promise you it is 100% worth it. All right. And then step number 2 to saying no is learning how to set boundaries. You have to make the conscious decision as to what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow. If you don't know what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, you're not going to have any foundation to stand on when those boundaries are breached. And please do not wait to be in the moment before you find out that something makes you uncomfortable, especially if you're learning how to say no. So take some time, pull out a journal, maybe record yourself, talk through these things. What are you okay with and not okay with in an intimate situation? What are you okay with and what are you not okay with in a co-working situation? What are you okay with? What are you not okay with in regards to maybe talking to your mother-in-law? Whatever it is, get really, really clear on what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow. I don't care about other people's feelings right now. Boundaries aren't for them. They're for you. And side note, if someone doesn't like your boundary, that doesn't mean you should have changed it. What that means is your boundary pissed them off, which is a them problem. You ain't got to deal with that. And here's one more thing. No one gets to tell you what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. I don't care if your best friend's boundaries are completely different than yours. You don't have to match hers. Yours are for you. Just because she doesn't allow something, but you do allow something, doesn't mean either of you are wrong. It means you're both independent people who have their own personal boundaries. So take some time and figure out what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to. And again, take these things. If you're struggling to figure out what your boundaries really are, 1, you're not alone, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. And 2, take the why test and apply it here. If you're kind of thinking through something, but you can't really figure out where the boundary line is, apply the why test. Ask yourself over and over and over again and get to the root. And once you get to the root of what you will or won't allow, maybe it's really not something they do. Maybe it's a behavior. Maybe it's not something that they say. Maybe it's something that triggers you from your past, and you're just not going to allow that type of energy. But you can't get to that root unless you do the work. And after you set the boundary, you've got to build up the skill of keeping the boundary. Once you create and communicate that boundary, it is up to you to keep it. Your only job from here on out is not to make other people comfortable. It is to set the boundary. Know why you're setting the boundary. Stand firm in it. Communicate what the boundary is. No one's a mind reader. Please communicate your boundaries. I don't care whether or not they like the boundary. That doesn't matter. Your only job is to communicate the boundary. So set the boundary, communicate the boundary, and then keep the boundary. From there on out, it's on them. Your only job is to keep up that boundary. When you're in a situation where your boundaries can be tested, I know that this can be really tricky, particularly in intimate situations where you're more vulnerable than usual. But this is also where your solid why comes in. For example, if you struggle with saying no in intimate situations, practice. Get really, really clear on your why. Why are you not going to allow this anymore? Why are you going to do it this way and not that way? Why are you drawing the line here? Why is this important to you? Why? And then once you get really clear on that why, practice saying no. I'm not like, I know this can be really awkward, but sit in front of the mirror, or again, maybe just talk to your, selfie cam and just have a communication. Ask your friend to maybe do some role play stuff with you. Innuendo. But like whatever, whatever it is, practice saying no. And I don't care whether or not you think you should be able to do this already. I don't care if you think this should be easy. I don't care if you think it shouldn't be a problem for you. The should or shouldn't doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that this is a problem for you. And chances are it's a problem for you because you weren't taught these things before. Therefore, it's not your fault. And there are no shoulds. The only should you need to do is put yourself first. And that's it. And if you're struggling, with practicing saying no, visualize some situations that you might end up in. Are you actively dating, but you're choosing not to get intimate with someone until X number of dates? Practice that. If that is something difficult for you, think about that. Think about what you're going to say in response. Think about how you're going to handle retorts. Think about, by the way, if someone argues with you on your body and what you want to do with your body, you don't need them in your life anyway. Let them peace out. Just no. There are a lot of studies that show that your brain doesn't really know the difference between an actual memory and one that's visualized. So if you sit down and you really take the time to visualize yourself saying no, visualize yourself in situations, you're basically giving your brain the building blocks to go, oh, hey, we've already done this before when the situation comes up. If you sit there in your mind and you're practicing saying no, you're practicing and you're just like, okay, I'm going to say this. And this is how it's playing in my head. And the situation actually comes up, your brain goes, oh, we've done this before. We know what to do. And it becomes so much easier to keep that boundary, especially when this is new for you. And if you really struggle with saying no, practice. Practice every single day. I'm not exaggerating. Practice every day. For how long? I don't know. However long it takes you. I would say at least 21 days, but it could be a lot more than that. It could be less. It all depends on you. But I don't want you to do this for 2 days and then quit because it's not making a difference. It takes time. Your brain doesn't heal overnight. You wouldn't slash yourself in the arm and expect it to be healed overnight, right? Your brain's the same way. Your brain is actively healing from wounds that were incurred in it. We got to give it time to heal. I'm going to say this over and over again, but I just want to make sure that this is abundantly clear. It is not your job to coddle someone. It is not your job to compromise on your boundaries to make someone else happy. It is not your job to make someone else comfortable. It is not your job to change what you want. It is not your job to give in. If it is not an enthusiastic hell yes, the answer is hell no. I don't care what situation you're in. That's facts. Period. End of story. Anyone who chooses to argue with you about your boundaries, anyone who chooses to look at you and not respect your boundaries, they don't respect you as a person, and they never really did, and they are not going to give you the attention and the affection that you deserve anyway, and then they get gone, period. So what have we done so far? 1, we practiced the why test. We figured out why boundaries are hard to keep and why we want to start setting them in the first place. 2, we are setting our boundaries. We've set the boundaries, we've communicated the boundary, and now we're going to keep the boundary. The final step in learning how to say no is giving yourself a crap ton of grace. Not every situation is going to go as planned. There are going to be times where things happen and you don't say no, and you know you should have, and you're going to regret it. And that's okay. This isn't a free pass to go and do whatever. But what I am saying is that you are human and you deserve to be treated as such. You don't need to beat yourself up over and over and over again just because you made a mistake. Yes, practice these things. Yes, be disciplined with yourself. Yes, set standards with yourself, but also know that you're human. You're not a robot. There's no setting to just, control, alt, delete some ish. This takes time and it takes practice and it takes falling on your face. And here's a spoiler alert. You will screw up. You are going to get mad at yourself. You are going to make choices that you wish you didn't make. Hey, I'm right here. I do it too. But we've got to give ourselves grace. That is where the true healing comes, is when you screw up and you tell your brain that it's okay to feel angry, sad, upset, or whatever, and then forgive itself. That's huge progress. And that in and of itself is going to build up your sense of self-worth, which is going to build up your sense of confidence, which is going to build up your ability to say, hey, no, I am worth more. I do deserve more. And no, I'm not going to allow that. No, I don't want to do that. No, I'm not feeling it. No, I don't have time. No, no, no. I really hope this show helped you out today. I really hope that this resonated with you. And if it did, and if you're wanting those next steps, if you're like, okay, this is resonating, but I need more of a guideline on what to do, I highly recommend you check out my free 5-day confidence course, 15 minutes a day, 5 days. You can invest 15 minutes into yourself for 5 days. Each module comes with a video and a worksheet to keep you accountable, and it gives you all the building blocks to build up your skill of confidence, to see your self-worth, to get even more comfortable saying no. The link for that's going to be in the description, so make sure you check that out along with the other links for a few other resources there as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and never forget that you are strong, you are capable, you are intelligent, and boo, you are so freaking worthy.